Hello, and welcome to week 7 of the course. This week we're going to talk about selective response test questions, and it's a lead up to your quiz project. First, we need to talk about what selective response questions are. First, you need to understand that questions on a test are often called items. So if you hear the word items, don't be confused. It just means questions. Selective response items are those items that students must choose the answer. So they don't have to write out the answer, they choose an answer. So it could be multiple choice, for example, true, false, matching. There's several types of selective response, and the first one is the binary response. This is any statement that has basically two answers, one of which is correct. True, false, yes, no, opinion, agree, or disagree. The most common use of the true, false item is to measure the ability to identify the correctness of statements of fact, definitions of terms, and statements of principle. It's a good idea to practice, there are certain best practices for true, false, or binary types of items, and these are summarized also in your tips document. Avoid broad statements such as usually, generally, or often, because those are subjective. Avoid trivial statements. So think about what it is you're assessing and try to assess that. If it sounds like it's a question on trivial pursuit, it's probably not appropriate. Avoid double negatives. So students have a hard time when you word a question negatively thinking if it's true or false. So generally it's a good idea to leave out negative statements like not. Don't write in long, complex sentences. Make it short and simple. Avoid including more than one idea per statement, because if you include more than one idea could be true, one idea could be false, and the student doesn't know how to mark it. And on a test, the number of true, false statements should be approximately equal. You should only use binary response when it's clearly indicated. It has certain advantages. For example, it's easy to grade, and it can cover a lot of material very quickly. Disadvantages include there's a very high chance the student can guess the answer. They can choose, even if they don't know anything about the topic, they have a 50% chance of getting it right. It can be difficult to create questions that are appropriate for true, false, or yes, no. And it's used only for low-level understanding, so what we call level 1 or knowledge level. A second kind of selective response consists of matching exercises. And this is, you're all familiar with this. There are two columns, and there's a left column and the right column. The items usually the left column are called the premise, and the item on the right column is usually called the response. And again, they're measuring factual information. Best practices for matching exercise are to include homogeneous materials. So, for example, you wouldn't mix up on a Civil War test, you wouldn't mix up items that include presidents' names and battle dates and names of battles, because it would be too easy for students to guess which goes with which. You should include an unequal number of responses and let students know that whether responses can be used once, more than once, or not at all. It's too easy for students to match if there's a one-to-one correspondence between the premise and the response. So you generally want to put in more responses so that there are some false responses that students don't need to use. This makes it harder for students to guess. You should arrange the list on the right logically. So, for example, if you're using dates, they should all be in chronological order. If you're using names or words, they should be in alphabetical order. All the items should be placed on the same page. Don't break a matching across two pages, because students have to flip back and forth then to see what goes with what, and it becomes confusing. Be sure the grammar makes sense. So for example, if the premise describes a noun, then the response or answer should be a noun. There are certain advantages to matching. It's useful for determining whether students can distinguish between vocabulary words, dates, etc. They're pretty easy to construct, and they can cover a lot of material in just a few questions. But again, they're only used for low-level knowledge types of understandings. Multiple choice is another frequently used selective response. It consists of a problem and a list of suggested solutions. The solution that is not correct is called a distractor. The multiple choice item is generally the most widely used type of objective test item, and it can effectively measure many of the simple learning outcomes measured by the short answer item, the true, false, and the matching. But it can also be used to measure a variety of complex outcomes, such as knowledge, understanding, and application areas. There are different parts of a multiple choice. The problem is called the stem of the item. So the part that you read first in a multiple choice is the stem. The suggested solutions are called the alternatives, or sometimes they're called the choices or options. The correct alternative is the answer, and as I said, the remaining alternatives, the incorrect answers, are called distractors. You may also hear them called decoys or foils. Multiple choice has many advantages. It's flexible, and you can use it to assess critical thinking. It does reduce vagueness in scoring because there's a right answer, and you know immediately if the student knows it. There's what we call less guessability than with true false, because true false only has 2 responses. Multiple choice generally has 3, 4, or even 5 responses. So with every response, students' chance of guessing it goes down. And if well constructed, it can be used to assess higher level understandings. So knowledge level 1, comprehension level 2, and application level 3. It does have some disadvantages. It's restricted to measuring verbal behaviors, that is, written or oral performance. It's not like a performance task where you're asking students to demonstrate their ability to do something. And sometimes it's hard to construct well written multiple choice items. There are some best practices for multiple choice. The stem should be meaningful by itself, presenting a definite problem. Frequently, a good way to think of this is the stem should be a complete sentence or question. Your stem should include as much of the item as possible. It's not always possible to do this, but again, as complete as possible. Most problems should be presented in positive terms. So you want to avoid the use of double negatives or the word not. All alternatives should be grammatically correct when read with the stem, so it should flow like a sentence. This is a big one. Alternatives should be plausible yet wrong. Frequently, we get frustrated with writing multiple choice and we'll just throw in silly possible answers, and students know right away they're wrong. So think about it this way. Your distractors or wrong answers should be almost right, and students should struggle a little bit if they don't know the answer. Yet, an item should have one clear, correct answer only. And again, distractors should be plausible, and there's a nice chart in your text for how to do this. You're going to have a chance to practice writing selected selective response items through 2 assignments. Most of the weeks, you'll probably noted that your assignment is worth 1 point, and that is 1 course point or 1% of your grade. However, this week you have 2 assignments, and they are worth a total of 2 course points. The first assignment is a selected response quiz that consists of 5 items, and you have to identify which selected response item is written better. You may use your textbook or your tip sheet or this lecture to help you identify those items. You should be provided feedback after each item or either at the end of the quiz. The second assignment is your discussion point, and we're going to do this a little differently this week. It's worth a total of 1.5 points. There are 3 parts to it. First, you're going to construct a few selected responses questions to a specific prompt that I've written in the discussion board. That's called your original post, and that's worth 0.5 point. And then you're going to provide feedback to at least 1 or perhaps more colleagues. You're going to do both of these by Sunday as usual at midnight. Your original post is worth 0.5 point, and your reaction post is worth 0.5 point. However, there's a third component this week. You need to respond to your colleagues and my feedback. So I've talked to you before and I've emailed you before about how you should be checking back to close off the communication with either me or a colleague. You can do this one of 3 ways. You can say thank you. You can write a comment, such as, I found this very helpful, or you can post another question, or could you elaborate on that, for example. And that's called the Getting Back post, and that's going to be worth 0.5 point. Now, this is not due until Monday, so it's actually due after this learning module is completed, but it's just a good idea to get yourself in the habit of going back and looking at those responses to your posts and to say thank you, close it out with a comment, or close it out with a thank you, or even ask another question if you need clarification. Now I'd like to switch gears and talk about your quiz creation project. Your field work assignment is due this week, by the way, and there are instructions for uploading it in the learning module. However, I want to start to talk about a new project that we have, and that is the quiz creation project. You're going to work to create a quiz of selected response items, so that would be multiple choice, true, false, or matching, with 10 selected response items. Now, the matching counts as 1 item, no matter how many responses you have. So you could have a matching with 7 or 8 items, but that still counts as 1 item. It's worth 15% of your grade, or 15 course points. The draft is due next week, October 30th, and the final is due November 6th. Here's how you get started. Go to the course homepage, open the assignments folder, and then open the quiz creation project folder. There's a set of instructions that are more detailed than this in that folder. There's also a grading rubric that you should read through and familiarize yourself with. You're going to create your quiz in a Word document, thinking about everything you're learning in this chapter and the tip sheet. When you've finished it, you're going to submit it to the assignments link in the folder, and you're going to upload your document as a Word file attachment, but do not submit it this week. Your project is going to include a description of the unit on which the assessment would be based. So write a paragraph, 3 to 5 sentences, that gives an overview of the grade level, the type of class, the resources, etc. The standards to be mastered, so you have to tie it into 1 or more standards. The objectives, 2 to 4, that are standards-based, broad enough for the unit, clear and measurable. 10 or 15 test items with the solutions to the test items. So you'll notice the asterisk here. If you're doing it on your own, you only need to do 10 items. If you're doing it with a partner, you may work with a partner, you need to submit 15 items. Please put both your name and your partner's name at the top of the page, so to indicate that this quiz is from both of you. And then both people should upload it, the same document, to their link. Your quiz project needs to contain at least 3 types of selective response test items. So you could use multiple choice, true completion, true false matching, including solutions. You could include written at various levels. So you might have, for example, a multiple choice that measures knowledge, or multiple choice that measures analysis or application. The quiz actually contains a math problem that's an excellent example of multiple choice with application. It should also contain a rationale for choosing the types of items you selected based on best practices in crafting assessments. So, for example, explain why you chose multiple choice or true false. Maybe you're only measuring basic knowledge, and so true false is appropriate. Or maybe you want to measure students' application of learning, and so you construct an item using multiple choice that measures higher level learning. You should justify your choices with course readings or notes, so feel free to use what I call conservative use of quotations. You don't want your whole paper to be a quotation from the textbook, but you can use it like salt and pepper on a meal, here or there. Be sure if you do use your text and you quote from your text that you cite it and you provide a reference in APA format. So I hope this helps you understand the assignment. Feel free to email any questions to me, Anna Heilbrenner at mercy.edu.